Chapter 7. Fight, Kate decided. Or rather, her body decided it for her, seeming to feel instinctively that she'd never make it up that hill. Her sketchbook was spiral bound with heavy wire, and one end was slightly uncoiled. It had been poking her for weeks. Now she dropped the charcoal sticks and brought the book up, poised for attack. Aim for the eyes, she thought. She knew she should be screaming, but her throat was too constricted. All this passed through her mind in the few seconds it took the stranger to reach her. Caitlin hadn't been in a fight since elementary school, but now her body seemed to know what to do. The stranger grabbed her arm. Caitlin jerked away. Now, she thought, and lashed out with the sketchbook, and it worked. The heavy wire caught him in the cheek, tearing a long bloody scratch. Fierce triumph surged up in Kate, but the next instant the stranger had her wrist and was twisting it, trying to make her let go of the sketch pad. It hurt, and the pain freed her voice. "Let go of me," she gasped. "Let go!" He twisted harder. Blood was running down his cheek, black in the moonlight. Caitlin tried to kick, but he turned his body and her kicks glanced off harmlessly. He had both her arms now. He was pushing her down onto the sloping ground of the hill. He was winning. "Scream," her mind told her. Caitlin sucked in a deep breath and screamed, but it was cut off almost before it started by the stranger's hand. "Shut up," he said in a furious whisper. Caitlin stared up at him over his smothering hand, knowing her eyes were wide with fear. He was so strong, and so much heavier than she was, she couldn't move at all. "You're so reckless, you never think," the stranger hissed. The moon was behind him, so his face was in shadow, but she could feel his anger. "He's going to kill me, and I'll never even know why," a small, clear part of her mind said. The rest of her was engulfed in sheer black terror as his hand stayed over her mouth. It was getting very difficult to breathe. Something reared up behind the stranger. Caitlin's dazed mind couldn't tell at first what it was, just a shape silhouetted against the moonlit sky. Then she saw it was a human shape, with something shining in his hand. There was a movement quicker than Kate's eyes could follow, and the stranger on top of her was jerked backwards slightly. The moonlight reflected off a knife blade. "Let go of her," a clipped, harsh voice said, "or I'll cut your throat." "Gabriel?" Caitlin thought in disbelief. But it was true, and now her panicked senses could interpret the scene in front of her. Gabriel was holding the stranger at knife point. The stranger's hands lifted away from Caitlin. She drew in a gasping, wheezing breath. "Now get up," Gabriel said. "Nice and easy. I'm in a bad mood tonight." The stranger rose in one slow, coordinated motion, like a dancer. The knife stayed at his throat the whole time. As soon as his weight was removed, Caitlin got her feet under her and took 2 scrambling steps up the hill. Adrenaline was still flooding over her in painful, useless waves. Her hands were shaking. "I should help Gabriel," she thought. "No matter how tough he is, he's a kid, and that stranger's a man. A strong man." "Want me to go back to the house and tell them?" she gasped, trying to make herself hard and competent. "Why?" Gabriel said briefly. He made some movement and the stranger went spinning, landing on his back on the ground. "Now get out," he said, looking down at the supine figure. "And don't come back unless you're tired of living. If I see you around it again, I'll forget I just did 2 years for murder." A shock went through Kate, but she didn't have time to think. Gabriel was speaking again. "I said, get out. Run. Show me a 4-minute mile." The stranger got up, not nearly as smoothly and gracefully as before. From what Kate could see of his expression, he was both furious and frightened. "You're both so stupid," he began. "Run," Gabriel suggested, holding the knife as if ready to throw it. The stranger turned and went, half running, half angrily stalking. When the crunch of his footsteps had died, Caitlin looked at Gabriel, who was holding up the knife and putting it in his back pocket, all in one practiced gesture. Murder, she thought. He was in jail for murder. What she said, rather unsteadily, was, "Thank you." He glanced up at her briefly, and she could swear he was amused, as if he knew the difference between her thoughts and her words. "Who was he? An old boyfriend?" he asked. "Don't be ridiculous," Kate snapped, and then wished she hadn't. One ought to be more polite to a murderer, especially when one was alone with him in the dark. I don't know who he is, she added, but he was at the airport when I came yesterday. He must have followed Joyce and me home. Gabriel looked at her skeptically, then shrugged. I don't think he'll come back. He started towards the house without turning to see if Kate was following. Caitlin picked up her sketchbook and went after him. What happened? Rob said, vaulting to his feet. He and Lewis and Anna were in the study, as was Joyce. Caitlin had looked for her on the first floor, then come up here. Rob was staring at Caitlin, who was just realizing that she had bits of dead leaves and grass in her hair, to Gabriel, who was behind her. What happened? He repeated in a more controlled but more frightening voice. What does it look like? Gabriel taunted at his very nastiest. Rob started towards him, golden eyes blazing. No, Caitlin said. Rob, don't. He didn't hurt me. He saved me. She felt a surge of dizzy excitement. Rob was angry for her, protective, but she couldn't let him fight Gabriel. He saved you, Rob said with open scorn. He was on one side of the doorway, staring at Gabriel as if trying to bore holes in him. Gabriel was on the other side, almost lounging against the wall and looking devastatingly handsome. Kate was caught in between them. She appealed to Joyce, who was rising from the study couch. It was that guy, the guy from the airport, she said. He was out back. She explained what had happened, watching the alarm grow on Joyce's face. Geez, you'd better call the police, Lewis said when she was done. He looked more impressed than scared. He's right, Anna said, her dark eyes sober. Oh, sure, call them, Gabriel sneered. I only just got paroled. They love to see people like me with switchblades. Joyce grimaced. She squeezed her eyes shut and did some stretching exercises with her shoulders. Caitlin's heart sank. Gabriel would be in trouble. He might even get sent back to jail. His part of the experiment would be ruined, and he might never learn to control his powers, all because he'd helped her. Rob was suddenly looking quite cheerful. Well, we've got to report it. Fine. Just give me 10 minutes start, Gabriel said through his teeth. Stop it, both of you, Caitlin said. Then she sighed. Being in love wasn't easy. She didn't want to make Rob unhappy, but she had no choice. I have an idea, she said hesitantly. We could call the police, but not tell them Gabriel was involved. I'll just say I got away from the guy out there. Then nobody would get in trouble, but the police could do whatever they need to. Rob's smile faded. Gabriel was still glaring, but Joyce opened her aquamarine eyes and beamed. Trust you, Kate, she said. Now where's the phone? Gabriel didn't stay to hear the call. He went into his room and shut the door behind him, and then, too tired but too restless to even sit down, he began to pace. Images kept floating through his mind. Caitlin lying in the moonlight with some maniac on top of her. What if he hadn't come along just then? The maniac had been right about one thing. She was reckless. She shouldn't be allowed out alone at night. She didn't have the right instincts for danger. She wasn't tough enough to protect herself. So, what? His mind asked. So you're going to protect her? Gabriel flashed one of his best disturbing smiles at nothing. Hardly. He was going to keep away from her, was what he was going to do. She was a nuisance, and she was stuck on Kessler. Gabriel could see that, even if Kessler was too stupid. Keep away from her. Yes, and he bet, he smiled again, that after what she'd seen tonight, she'd keep away from him. 2 hours later, Kate was lying in bed, trying to calm down enough to go to sleep. There had been a lot of fuss with the police, who'd gone down into the backyard, but had found nothing. They promised to have a cruiser patrol in the area, and Joyce had told the kids to check the door locks and keep a close lookout for strangers from now on. And I don't want you going anywhere alone, she told Kate firmly, especially at night. Kate was happy to agree. But now she couldn't sleep. It had all been too weird, too disturbing. Why would some cult guy from the airport follow her home? Was he some cult guy? If not, why had he been wearing the robes? A disguise? A stupid one. What did he want? And beneath all her other thoughts ran a continuous whispering thread. Gabriel was a murderer.